Boa tarde, pessoal. Em nome do Instituto de Formação de Líderes de Santa Catarina, eu dou as boas-vindas a vocês ao terceiro Fórum Liberdade e Democracia e agradeço a presença de todos. Esse evento é resultado de um esforço mega conjunto dos nossos diretores, dos nossos associados, dos palestrantes que estão conosco hoje, voluntários, super equipe de produção e do respaldo dos nossos patrocinadores, Potencial, a Influ, CDL São José, a FIP Feira da Moda, Federação das Indústrias de Santa Catarina, o AT e Passeio Primavera. Agradecemos especialmente aos nossos amigos do IFL de Belo Horizonte, São Paulo e Rio de Janeiro, do Líderes do Amanhã de Vitória, do Instituto de Estudos Empresariais de Porto Alegre e do Instituto Mises Brasil e Instituto Friedrich Naumann. A missão do IFL e desses grandes institutos que eu acabei de mencionar para vocês é formar lideranças que transformem o mundo pelo apreço à liberdade. E o Fórum é o momento em que a gente leva esse espaço tão incrível da nossa formação, de todas as segundas-feiras, para vocês, para a grande sociedade. E apesar de toda hora ser muito oportuna para a soma de ideias e para a construção de novas soluções, o nosso momento é particularmente importante para parar e pensar no entorno. A gente está emergindo de mais um período caótico, de instituições combalidas, e 2018 nos reserva uma nova oportunidade de pararmos de olhar para Brasília e começarmos a olhar para os brasileiros, como lembrou nosso vídeo. A gente sabe que tudo que é pensado, criado, produzido, todas as agruras e alegrias, todo o peso e a leveza da vida passam pelas pessoas. São as pessoas os últimos heróis na ponta da organização social, que sonham, assumem os riscos, empreendem e movem o mundo. Com essa energia é que o terceiro Fórum Liberdade e Democracia de Florianópolis traz hoje uma discussão sobre como o nosso contexto institucional tem afetado as 3 esferas de ação das pessoas, que é pensar e inovar, empreender e produzir, e construir e viver nas nossas cidades. A gente consolida o Fórum ao final com um escrutínio sobre o poder político e aonde ele tem nos levado. A gente vai construir ao longo desse dia ideias prospectivas para o país nos próximos anos, novas soluções, vislumbrando um projeto de longo prazo de um Brasil mais livre. Se eu tivesse que resumir hoje o nosso propósito com o Fórum em poucas palavras, eu diria que é fazer despertar e engrandecer nosso espírito de vigilância por aquilo que é nosso, pelas pessoas e pelas nossas liberdades. Finalizo essa fala, então, com uma frase que o Gabriel me mostrou essa semana, que é da novela, uma radionovela do livro Admirável Mundo Novo, do Huxley, que diz: a eterna vigilância não é somente o preço da liberdade, a eterna vigilância é o preço da humanidade, é o preço disso aqui. Então, eu emendo que será o preço também para a gente realizar o Brasil, e hoje a gente começa a construir uma ideia sobre como realizar o Brasil daqui para frente. Obrigada e bom fórum a todos.
Gostaria de chamar agora ao palco querido Gabriel, ilustríssimo vice-presidente do IFL, por gentileza.
Obrigado a todos pela presença aqui hoje, obrigado a Giulia pela incrível fala, Danilo pela incrível intermediação aqui do evento. Eu tenho certeza que todos aqui vão sair mais preparados para enfrentar os desafios que lá fora nos esperam do que quando chegaram. Nós temos um time de palestrantes de peso para discutir esses assuntos de extrema relevância conosco. E hoje o nosso primeiro convidado, ele é mais do que especial, ele é internacional. A gente vai disponibilizar tradução simultânea em máquinas de tradução para quem precisar. Então, enquanto aqui eu faço a fala de abertura, já deixo disponível e informo vocês que nossos voluntários estão aqui no lado do palco, distribuindo as máquinas de tradução. Basta entregar os documentos para aqueles que precisarem para a palestra proferida em inglês. Nós teremos também perguntas em todos os painéis, nossos Q&As. As perguntas devem ser enviadas. Será que a gente consegue botar na tela técnica? Para o DDD 48 999 12 5202. Esse é o nosso telefone, então, para enviar o WhatsApp com as perguntas para todos os palestrantes. Bom, o primeiro tema que a gente abre aqui o fórum é sobre lições da economia chinesa para o Brasil. A China é um país que chama a atenção do mundo inteiro. Eles têm um sistema político que é altamente centralizado, mas, por algum motivo, cresce-se muito naquele país. Para nós brasileiros, que estamos acostumados com a ilusão de liberdade no nosso país, Pode até surpreender saber que a China, ela ocupa um lugar mais avançado nos termos de liberdade de comércio e produção do que o nosso próprio país. No último índice lançado no começo deste ano, a China ela pontua na posição 110 entre 180 países pesquisados, enquanto o Brasil está na posição 153. Eles são melhores que a gente em quesitos como efetividade judicial, liberdade de trabalho, liberdade de comércio e muitos outros. Para entender um pouco mais como operam esses mercados num sistema tão contraditório, segundo nossos olhos, e o que os chineses podem ensinar para o Brasil, um país que cresce há 5 anos seguidos, a mais de 7% ao ano, a gente traz aqui um verdadeiro especialista no assunto, como todos os palestrantes que a gente tem hoje. Jeffrey Towson foi eleito pelo LinkedIn como voz mais importante sobre finanças no mundo, líder de investimentos por 10 anos, do 4º homem mais rico do mundo, Príncipe Walid, da Arábia Saudita, com mais de 20 bilhões de dólares desenvolvidos em projetos nos Estados Unidos, Norte da África, Oriente Médio e Ásia. Jeffrey Towson também é professor na Universidade de Colômbia e Universidade de Pequim, autor do best-seller em business da China, The 1 Hour China Book, a Economia Chinesa em 1 hora. Hoje, Jeffrey compartilha conosco um pouco de seu conhecimento sobre as lições da economia chinesa que podemos aprender no Brasil. Eu tenho a honra de apresentar para todos vocês Jeffrey Towson.
Good afternoon. I think we're getting set up here in a moment. We're okay? Okay. Well, I'm from Beijing, where the skies are never this blue, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here. First, I'd like to thank the IFL for inviting me. Joseph Tepperman randomly emailed me one day and said, would you like to come to Brazil? And I said, yes. And he said, like, don't you want to know what it's for? I said, I don't care what it's for. I actually spend 1 to 2 months in Brazil every year if I can manage it. It's sort of my favorite go-to place. Also, thank you to Giulia Baretta for putting on such a great event, and as well, Gabriel who is now translating from the booth. Okay. I'm just going to make a couple points today. I'm not expecting that anyone here knows much about China, but I'm going to press a couple points that you should start to understand it, because it is going to impact your world. We are just at the beginning of something very big. And I'm going to make a couple takeaways about that. Here's a little bit about me. I think you just got an introduction. I focus on Chinese consumers and digital China, Alibaba, these digital giants you probably hear about. I do a lot of healthcare. I used to work for someone named Prince Al-Walid, who was the richest person in Saudi Arabia. If you're following the news, he was recently imprisoned and then released in the last couple of months. It was kind of a big topic. And I teach a bit in China and a couple other places. That's Prince Al-Walid. I won't talk about him. When I joined him back in 2004 or so, he was about the 4th richest person in the world. Big investor in the Middle East, in the US, media, hotels, lots of stuff. I'm not going to go through that. Some of his companies, a lot of hotels. And that's a little picture from Peking University, where my office is. The skies are never that blue. I did actually take this myself, so it's not doctored, but they're not that blue. Okay. So really just 3 to 4 points. First one is Brazil, China. We are at the beginning of something very big. And 5 years from now, it's going to be dramatically bigger. So my advice is get ready. Now, if we go back to 2010, Brazil, China, you would have probably seen a chart like this, which is a lot about trade. That China emerged on the scene and became the biggest trading partner for Brazil and a lot of other countries very, very quickly, because when you look at what % of the world's commodities they're using, it went through the roof. And this is a chart from like 2008. So there would have been a lot of talk about that. At the same, why is this not working? At the same time, there would have been a lot of talk about China starting to have money. It didn't have money for a long time. 2008-9, the reserves started to go up, 1 trillion, 2 trillion. And they started to spend that money for the first time, which was a decent part of the Brazil-China story 2010. This is outbound foreign direct investment. 2003 was nothing. It just goes through the roof. And this was a lot of SOE, state-owned enterprise deals, agriculture, natural resources. You heard a lot about these deals back then. That's kind of where we were. What you didn't hear back then were things like Chinese consumers. It was not discussed. You don't see them. You don't see the tourists. You don't see them buying things. Chinese capital, sort of. Chinese companies. Most people back then couldn't name a Chinese company, let's say in Brazil, if we were living in Brazil looking at China. And then if you were to ask people about politics, who's the president of China? Nobody could tell you. Well, that's all changed. That was just 6 years ago. So it's worth thinking about how much the world has changed so quickly. Now, if you fast forward to today, certain things have really changed. The most important one, my area of study, is Chinese consumers. Chinese consumers have arrived as an economic force that is staggeringly big and staggeringly fickle. They change their minds all the time. When they decided last year they really liked avocados, which they had never eaten before, Mexico's exports of avocados went through the roof. When they decided they liked certain villages in England as tourist sites, the cities were overrun with tourists. So this is a big force, and when it gets interested in something, it can be very shocking. Now this is sort of urban disposable income per person in China. I don't think this laser's working. 1990 to a couple years ago, basically 500% increase. This became a group with money. Certain things happened at the same time. They started to travel for the first time. 2012, very few Chinese tourists outside of China. Last year, 130 million of them. 8 million into Thailand. Like 6 million into France. The numbers are amazing. Brazil, very small still, like 70,000. It's sort of off the radar still. Other things that happen. Almost every 3 months you'll hear a story about China is now the world's biggest market for X. It's now the world's biggest market for cars. True. It's the world's biggest market for retail. True. E-commerce, mostly true. Online gaming, true. Offline gaming, true. Every couple months it's a new one. It's becoming the biggest market for most everything. And this is just the beginning of this. What other? Groceries, retail, blockbuster movies. It's going to become #1 in a couple months, probably this year. A couple other things have happened. Chinese companies have started to go abroad. A couple months ago, Chuxing Didi, which most people didn't know, bought 99, the Uber of Brazil. That's now a Chinese company. They bought all of it. Mobike, these bicycle rental, which I'll talk about, they're launching in Brazil right now. Smartphones, Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, all these numbers, all these brands are starting to become known. Alibaba, Jack Ma. So it's moved on to the radar, and on top of just companies, consumers, and capital, it's now become a political topic. If I ask you who's the president of China today, I suspect a lot of you know. There's been some news on this in the last couple of weeks too, about how long the terms last for president. This is something that's discussed. So the political system, the culture, the consumers, the companies, the capital have already arrived. Now, if that's just 6 years, I'll give you another chart. This is basically the last 5 years of increase in private consumption. The big blue bar is 25% of all the growth in private consumption was by US consumers. The red bar is China. It's about the same. The difference is the Chinese consumers are getting wealthier and wealthier at a very rapid pace, and the base is much smaller. The US is a larger system, but smaller growth. So most of the world's consumption is now going to be coming from China, at least 25, 30, 40%. Those are the numbers. It's more impressive when you actually see it in real life. This is a typical tourist spot in China. This is Nanjing. You go to any tourist spot in Asia on a Saturday, it's going to look like this pretty much. Go to the Louvre in Paris on a Saturday and see what you see. It's going to look like this. There's just a lot of people. This has lots of funny consequences. One consequence is there's lots of niches that are actually quite large. If you look at bridal registry and bridal wedding photography, it's a huge business. And there are certain places everyone goes to. So me and a friend have a competition of who can get the most brides in one photo. Because they go to certain places to take photos. I've gotten this isn't mine, but I've gotten one with 7 different brides in one photo at like the Louvre. So there's a lot of funny stories that come out of this big consumer demographic. Okay, so that's 2017, and think how different we are than 2010. Imagine where we'll be in 2025. This is just the beginning of a very big wave. So I put some numbers together. This is what I think 2025 is going to look like. The number of people that live in cities, urbanites, is about 600 million in China. That number is going to hit 1 billion in about 7 years. So you will have 1 billion people living in Chinese cities, in apartments, going to the park, shopping at the Carrefour, going to the movies. That population will be bigger than the population of North and South America combined. The number of people moving into Chinese cities every 8 years is the population of Japan. So if you're running a Chinese city, if you're a mayor, you are building at a crazy rate. You've got to build apartment buildings, subways, everything. You got to have more police, you got to have more parks. They are just expanding at an amazing rate. So it's a lot of this is, look, 1 billion Chinese are on the way, city dwellers, you can sell to them. Within that, there's going to be about 250 million middle-class families who can take vacations to Paris, who can buy goods out of Brazil directly and have them, shipped in. They can buy avocados. They can, these are people who have all the things you can buy in life. 250 million families, not individuals, families. The argument is the last century, to a large degree, was powered by the American consumer, and that this century may well be powered by the Chinese consumer. It's a huge phenomenon. And it's real funny when they change their mind about stuff. You're popular and your company triples its revenue, and then they decide they don't like you and it falls in half. It's really funny to watch. Another factor, which I won't go into, is this demographic is also getting dramatically smarter. They're all going to university now. Every year there's about 9 million graduates. That's up from 1 million per year in 2000. So between now and 2025, you'll have about 75 million graduates with engineering degrees, with design degrees, artists, musicians, animators. There's a sea of talented professionals on the way, and they all start a lot of companies. That's what's coming. Okay. Now let's talk about Brazil. Actually, if you look at I just checked the news on the way here. You can see these deals in the news almost every 2 to 3 weeks now in Brazil. They bought 99. A Chinese company just bought the 2nd largest container port in Brazil. Fosun, the big healthcare conglomerate, just bought an investment group in Sao Paulo a couple weeks ago. This happens almost every 2 weeks now. There's something like this. Okay. So, point 1, we're at the beginning. It's a big deal. Start to pay attention to it. And you really don't have any choice, because you can stay here, but this is all coming your way. Consumers, capital, company, it's all coming. So lesson number 1, I think when I was sort of looking at this question of what can Brazil maybe learn from China, because China's a very unique scenario, amazing story. What are there lessons that apply here? And I am by no means a Brazil expert in any measure. So this is my impression as a China person. Lesson number 1, is, well, I'll explain this because that's a little cryptic. Lesson number one is this chart. I think this is the big chart to understand. This is the green line and the red line are what matter. Ignore the purple line. The green is India, the red is China. You go back to 1990, these countries were very similar. About 1 billion people each. GDP per capita was about the same. This chart is GDP per capita. You know, relatively poor populations, big geographic mass. They both started from the same point. India sort of went along in the green line, and China has not just grown faster, it has gone exponential in the last 5 to 10 years. And you can now look at the growth in China's economy, the GDP, about every 2 to 3 years, it grows by the size of India. It's that big, and it's accelerating. Look at the exponential. My question, if I was living here studying something, I would say, how do we be the red curve and not the green curve? What causes that difference over time? Now, I am not an economist. In fact, I suck at economics. I'm not good at it. I don't like it. Economists don't like me at all. So how did that happen? So I just sort of punted the question. I was in Omaha a couple weeks ago, and I took some students out to have lunch with Warren Buffett. So we asked him, why is China so successful? And I'll just say his answer roughly was, China has figured out a secret sauce, and they are now compounding wealth. And that was my explanation, compounding. Compounding. You make 4% a year, you're doing great. Then you have a bigger base, and you make 4% on the bigger number. Then you make another 4%, you make another 4%. And if you do it consistently for long periods of time, the curve isn't linear, the curve goes exponential. That to me is what's going on in China. They have been compounding wealth since about 1980. And the trick with this is you got to be consistent, because if you have a couple down years, you lose the effect. It's a consistency over time. And when I look at this curve, I think compounding. That's why we're getting that exponential. Now, Warren Buffett is also a compounder. Actually, if you draw a picture of the United States from about 1930 to now, you get the same exponential curve. It's a compounding phenomenon. And actually, if you look at Berkshire Hathaway, Buffett's company, you look at his book assets and his stock value, he's a compounder too. He made 95% of all his wealth after age 60. You know, he had a good 30 to 40 years of like this, and then the curve went like that, because he's very consistent. He's a compounder. So his argument was China's compounding. They have found a mechanism for doing that that's unique to their political system. But they are hitting the numbers, and we are now moving up the exponential part of the curve. Now, okay, so if that's the goal, how do you get there? The US gets there one way, China gets there another way. So again, I'm not an economist, so I just went, these are Buffett's comments, basically. That they're doing a couple things. One, this is the US and China. The US has basically unleashed human potential. That's his phrase. That's what the US is doing. That's what China is doing. They're unleashing human potential. It's an entrepreneurial's dream. And that's sort of my takeaway one if I was looking at question. China's a story of entrepreneurial capitalism plus time. And that gets you compounding in the long term. That, I think, explains most of this. But I'm not an economist, so that's sort of that's what I'm looking for. And the question is, can Brazil do the same? It's also worth keeping in mind that China does this in a very different way than the US. There's Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, his joke was that China copied all the best aspects of the US, and then India copied all the worst. I don't know if that's true. It seems kind of mean, but it's his joke, it's not mine. Okay. Anyways, that's the end of the economist stuff, because it's not my area. This is a simplistic view from a person who lives, I do microanalysis, I do company analysis. So that's a simplistic view, but that exponential curve to me is the key question. All right, we'll go back to my level, which is, Lesson number 2, let the ambitious break the rules. This happens in China. China is the land of licenses. There are more licenses for, you can't imagine how many licenses there are for everything. However, you can kind of ignore them a lot of the time. This is the bike sharing phenomenon. Starting about 1.5 years ago, 2 companies, Mobike, that's Mobike, and Ofo, just started putting these bikes on the streets. They didn't ask for permission, they didn't get a license, they just put them on the street. And people started riding them. And they didn't put a couple, they put like 5,000 on the street a day. And then they put 10,000 on the street. And then together these 2 companies deployed 12 million bikes on the streets of Chinese cities. Could you do that in New York? No, you'd get arrested in the bikes we had taken in a day. You couldn't do that in London. You can do that in China because the government accepts that it's worth breaking the rules sometimes. And they basically let them run. You know, the rules said you can't do this, and all the local governments said, yeah, it's fine, don't worry about it. And they have a habit. Oh, here's these bikes, you put them on the street, and then people use them and you leave them. This is the life of one bike over 1 year in Shanghai. All the people riding it, they leave it. You get on, you ride it, you get off, you leave it. Someone else comes on, rides it, leaves it. This is 1 year in the life of a Mobike. This pattern, you do see this a lot, that the Chinese government, even though it's a land of licenses, will let ambitious people run and break the rules for about 1.5 years, and then they will generally step in and say, okay, we need some rules on this now. There's bikes everywhere. And they do this over and over. And they've done this for other companies. This is an electric scooter company. Again, the company just started putting them on the street. You sign up with it on your phone, no license, no nothing. What is with this? Getting a car in China is very difficult. You have to get a license, you have to get permits, because there's so many people, it's very controlled. So what a lot of people do is they ride these electric carts that are unregulated. Well, what's happened is these electric carts that used to look like that have turned into mini cars where you can buy little Hummers. This is like 1/3 the size of a normal car. So you can get into a normal little electric car, and these things are, and people just zoom up the sidewalks and they leave them everywhere. And the government knows this, but again, just let it happen. There's a real tolerance for just break the rules, it's okay. If it's an advancement. And the final one to think about is Uber. Uber came to China in late 2015. They fought the local champion Didi, which was Kuaidi and Didi at that point, and there was a massive fight for ride sharing. Drivers and riders shared riding. Uber spent $2 billion, Didi spent like $3 billion, Didi won, Uber merged, it was over. All during that phase, all during the war, which everyone wrote about, ride sharing was illegal. Both companies knew this. This is illegal, not allowed. Again, the government just kind of said, it's fine, go ahead. And this was usually local government that allowed this, that it was worth letting ambitious people break the rules for 1 year or 2. And then just like in the bike sharing, about 1 year later, the government then stepped in and said, okay, now we're going to put some rules. But we're not going to put the rules first, we're going to let it run for a while. And it's usually local governments that do this, because they want it to be in their area. So that's something I think worth thinking about, is let the ambitious break the rules if you can, which obviously Brazil is different. I think it's a real source of power versus other countries like the US and London. You couldn't have done either of those things in those countries, or Japan or other places. All right, last point. I think I'm on time here, which is actually surprising for me. I think this one is probably more relevant to Brazil, which is your best tool, your most powerful tool against an underdeveloped industry or an industry that's been stagnant because of regulation or other things, is digital disruption. And Chinese companies are outstanding at this. Okay. The company here that I like to think about is Yuebao, which is it's a money market fund. If you had gone back 2012, there's 4 big banks of China: state-owned, state-directed, Bank of China, ICBC, Agriculture Bank of China. These are the giants of state-controlled banking. And you don't have a lot of options. You can get a checking account or a savings account. The interest rate is nothing. Service is not good. 2013, Alibaba, the digital giant, without asking permission, as far as I can tell, launched a money market fund, just did it. And they said, you can now put your money in Yuebao, which Yuebao means leftover treasure. You can put some of your money in Yuebao. And about 20 million people did it within a couple months. And they raised $80 billion within about 6 months. Today, Yuebao is the world's largest money market fund, I believe, with $165 billion under management. This is basically being a digital disruptor against a stagnant industry. And they did a couple things that were important. This is actually happening in China all the time now. It's happening in healthcare. In fact, the big digital companies are systematically targeting sort of poorly developed or regulatory constrained industries. They're targeting them with their tools. You get a really big impact from this somewhere like China that you don't get in the US. When Amazon takes on Walmart, you have to keep in mind Walmart's very advanced. Their productivity is high, their efficiency high, the retail market of the US is very developed. In China, that's not the case. You're looking at mom and pop shops that overwhelmingly dominate the retail landscape. So you get a much bigger bang for your buck when you target a low productivity sector. So these digital, they're targeting healthcare, they're targeting real estate, they're targeting auto, they're targeting transportation, because those are all sort of underdeveloped still. It's a really powerful approach. The next up is probably new retail, which is Alibaba's big initiative this year. The other thing they always do is they go direct to consumers. They don't reform the problem industry, they go around them, and they go right to consumers who are on their smartphones. That's how Yuebao, they didn't go to the bank, they just went to the consumers and said, transfer your money. So they're bypassing the problematic institutions and going direct to consumers, and the consumers are ecstatic, because they're frustrated. The number one thing they offer is decreased price and increased convenience. Uber is more convenient than taking a state-run taxi. Yuebao is more convenient than doing a state-owned bank. Bike sharing is actually more convenient than renting or buying a bike. Their pitch is almost always convenience and price, and the people are glad to have them and move very quickly. So you see that playbook a lot. And then eventually, usually the government or the institution that's being disrupted will respond. But it's very hard to respond when you have 80 million people signed up to your service. So when the banks did complain, the government basically said, okay, we shouldn't have too much of this, but we're not going to make 80 million people shift back. So you get sort of grandfathered in. So that customer base sort of protects you a little bit. And that's what's happened in all these cases. These digital giants jumped into a stagnant industry, went direct to consumers, got a lot of traction, and then when the government did respond, they usually said, it's fine. We're not going to make all those people give up their taxis, which they've been using. So you kind of get in under the wire. Very common. Jack Ma is very famous for this, the founder of Alibaba. He does this all the time. It's great to watch. Here's some more, we're out of time, some more digital disruption that's sort of coming along now. Those are autonomous vehicles that Jingdong, the big e-commerce, Alibaba's the big e-commerce company, Jingdong's number 2. That's their autonomous vehicles that move around campuses and business parks and deliver your package that you order on your phone. So I can order lunch on my phone, and one of those will come rolling up to my office. And the little it opens up and you go up and it either scans your face and it opens and I get my lunch or I use my phone. Drones are now delivering things, and they're used more for logistics, so big packages are being moved into rural villages, and they're using that to move packages as opposed to using this shipping system, which is still pretty problematic. Disruption, disruption. Entertainment-wise, if you go into a subway, these are karaoke booths. So I can go in there with my phone and pay and load up and sing. There's two little stools where you can sit with your friend, you see the microphone, and you can sing. They're in the shopping malls, they're in the subways. This is a vending machine that's very popular, like little kids love it. This father's buying it for his little girls. It squeezes the oranges in the machine, so it's full of oranges. And you pay with your phone, and they get squeezed and you get this fresh squeezed orange juice now. There's stuff like this happening all over the place. It's a real powerful tool. And that's kind of my basic points. Get ready. This is all coming to you. Go for compounding. Any country, city, province, company, or individual that can start compounding. I mean, this is how Buffett became wealthy. This is how Berkshire Hathaway became big. This is how China became, I mean, it's just a powerful thing, and if you can pull that off, there's a lot of power in that. If possible, let the ambitious break the rules, which is a big deal in a country with a ton of rules, which China has. Digital disruption is your most powerful tool, and then I won't talk about mega trends, I'll do it. But those are kind of my main points. This is my favorite slide. Everyone talks about China's growth. This is the Shenzhen subway in 2003, 14 years ago. This is the Shenzhen subway today. And they're not done. They've still got like another 30%. That's a good visual for how fast things are changing. I come from New York. You can't build one subway line in 10 years. You can't put up a building without permits until you get 2 to 3 years of permitting done. They do this in cities everywhere. So it's a very rapid place. So imagine what life will be like in 5 years. Oh. Go back up. That's fine. Just put the last slide. Just go to the very last slide. There we go. Anyways, that's my basic point. If I can be of any help, if you want to talk about this stuff, my email's on that webpage. Sorry, I didn't put it up there. My email's definitely there, or the IFL has my address. This is Pequing University. If you ever want to come out and get a sense for what's going on, or if you ever want to do something in Brazil, call me. I'm totally on their way. Like anywhere in Brazil, anytime I'll go. But that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching or listening.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your concerns. Obrigado, Jeff, pelas suas palavras. A gente vai fazer apenas algumas perguntas devido ao nosso adiantar da hora. Just a couple of questions because we are running out of time now. So, what do you think are the new trends for China now that all of this has happened? What do you think China is going to look regarding to their local businesses, the companies running there? What do you think are going to be the sizes of their markets, the kind of markets that are going to grow in the next years? Do you think that the China economics is going to look like the US economics, like big companies buying the small ones? Or do you think it's going to be more decentralized because of this disruption on technology? Então, perguntando para ele se ele acha que o crescimento chinês será parecido com o crescimento americano, com grandes empresas dominando pequenos mercados, ou de maneira mais descentralizada devido aos avanços tecnológicos.
I'll give a short answer because there's a lot going on. But the two trends I look at, and the two trends that I think have a lot of international relevance, so Brazil, is Definitely Chinese consumers. Chinese consumers are upgrading their lifestyles. They used to eat a lot of rice, now they want steak. Well, where do you get the steak?
You have to interrupt you a few seconds to translate.
Oh, yeah.
Então, algumas coisas que a gente está vendo que são relevantes para o Brasil. Primeiro é sobre os consumidores chineses. Eles consumiam bastante arroz e agora eles estão consumindo bastante carne.
So I would look for that, tourism, food, agriculture. They're basically just upgrading their lives. They've seen the world, they've traveled, they want it all, and they can afford it.
Então, comida, agricultura, turismo, eles, como estão viajando muito, eles estão vendo o resto do mundo e eles querem tudo isso que sabem que é bom.
The second one is my other area, which is digital China. The companies that are at the forefront of this are leading now. They're moving ahead of the US Silicon Valley companies. If you have a drone, it probably came from DJI in China. If you buy a robot, China. Smartphone, China. Anything that combines software and hardware in particular, they are incredibly good at.
E o segundo ponto, que eu trabalho bastante, sobre a economia digital chinesa. Se você hoje compra um celular, é da China, qualquer computador é da China, e eles estão crescendo muito mais rápido do que as empresas do Vale do Silício. Então esse é um mercado que eles vão certamente dominar mais no futuro. Good to go? Since we got a lot of questions in the WhatsApp, but we have run out of time already, so we're going to stop here. Any further questions, people can direct straight to your email.
Contact me directly, please.
A gente recebeu bastante perguntas, mas devido ao adiantar da hora, a gente vai finalizar aqui. Qualquer outras perguntas, vocês podem enviar por e-mail. Peço novamente uma salva de palmas para o Mr. Jeffrey Towson.